The desert stretched in every direction, endless and hot under the twin suns. The air shimmered above the golden dunes, hiding the wreckage until you stood almost on top of it. The metal hull of the crashed ship was torn open, blackened by fire, and half buried in sand. A man stood at the edge of the wreck, his shadow falling long across the scorched metal. His name was Jace, and he was not here to help anyone. He was here to take whatever he could carry. He moved carefully, scanning the horizon for patrols. The war between humans and the alien Clyran Empire had made this desert a dangerous place. Every soldier or scavenger out here was desperate, and desperate people killed without hesitation. Jace had no intention of dying over someone else's war. He just wanted the valuable tech this wreck might hold. And yet, as he stepped inside the dark hull, he froze. There was someone lying there. On the floor, she was unlike any alien he had seen. Her skin was a deep shimmering blue, smooth like glass. Silver white hair spilled across the floor like strands of light. She wore battle armor that looked both ceremonial and deadly, though it was cracked and scorched in places. Her breathing was slow and steady. She was alive but unconscious. Jace felt his instincts telling him to leave. A warrior like her was trouble. But then his eyes drifted to the spear resting in the sand beside her. It was unlike any weapon he knew. The shaft was black and metallic, etched with glowing symbols that pulsed faintly, as if alive. The tip burned with an orange light that seemed to hum in the air. Even in the dim light of the wreck, it looked dangerous and valuable. If he could take it back to the city, he could trade it for enough credits to disappear for good. He stepped forward, his boots crunching on the sand that had spilled inside the ship. The woman did not stir. Her head rested to one side, her armor rising and falling with each slow breath. Her face was calm, almost peaceful, though there was a faint scar running from her temple down to her jaw. She looked like someone who had fought in 100 battles and survived them all. Jace told himself she would not survive this desert without help. In a way, taking the spear would not hurt her. She would never know who had stolen it. He reached down toward the weapon. The hum of the spear grew louder. It was subtle at first, almost like the sound of wind, but then it became a low vibration he could feel in his fingers. The glow of the blade brightened, reflecting off the walls of the wreck. Jace hesitated, his heart pounding. He glanced at the woman. She was still motionless. He swallowed, telling himself it was just his nerves. His hand closed around the shaft of the spear. The spear's glow flared like a sunrise. Heat surged up his arm, not burning but powerful, alive. His breath caught in his throat. For a moment, it felt like the desert itself had gone silent. No wind, no sound, nothing but the pulsing in his hand. And then the spear moved. It twisted in his grip, jerking his arm upward as if it had its own will. Jace staggered back, his boots slipping in the sand. The woman still had not moved. But her weapon had. The tip of the spear turned toward him, its light now burning white. It pulled against his hand, trying to wrench itself free. The vibration grew stronger until it rattled his teeth. Jace let go, stumbling backward. The spear did not fall. It floated in the air, perfectly still except for the faint rotation of its glowing blade. He could not breathe. He could not think. All he knew was that the weapon was watching him. Somehow it knew what he had tried to do. The spear floated between them, humming with a sound that was neither mechanical nor natural. It was like hearing the heartbeat of something that should not be alive. Jace could feel the air grow warmer around it. The orange light from its blade painted the walls of the wreck and lit the unconscious alien's face in a strange glow. She still had not moved, but Jace now wondered if she was truly asleep or simply waiting. He took a cautious step backward, his eyes locked on the weapon he had stolen before. He had faced guards, traps, even machines that shot on sight. But nothing had ever felt like this. The spear was not a tool. It was something else, something with intent. His chest tightened as a thought came to him. Maybe the spear was protecting her. If that was true, then trying again would be suicide. And yet, walking away now would mean giving up the prize of a lifetime. His boots scraped the sand as he shifted to the side, testing if the weapon would follow. It turned slowly in the air, its tip tracking his movement with eerie precision. His breath grew shallow. He wondered if the spear could strike on its own. That was when he noticed the faint shimmer. Along its edge, a ripple in the air that looked like heat but moved too sharply to be heat. It was sharpness itself, visible and alive. Jace's skin prickled, and a drop of sweat slid down his temple. He froze when the woman's fingers twitched. It was small, barely there, but his eyes caught it. Her breathing changed, becoming deeper and slower, as though she was coming awake. The spear's hum deepened, vibrating in his bones. His instincts screamed to run, but the open desert outside offered no safety. If she woke and saw him, she would know what he had tried to do. And if she was a warrior, she would kill him without hesitation. Her eyes opened. They were unlike anything he had ever seen. A pale silver glow sat in them, steady and cold, like moonlight over frozen water. She did not look at the spear. She looked directly at him. Jace felt pinned under that gaze, as though she could see every lie he had ever told and every crime he had ever committed. The spear drifted closer to him, its tip lowering until it was level with his chest. He could hear his own heartbeat. "Quick and loud, you tried to take it," she said. Her voice was calm, but it cut through the air like a blade. Her accent was strange, the words heavy with a rhythm that was not human. Jace tried to speak, to explain, but no sound came out. She rose to one knee, her hand lifting, and the spear drifted back toward her like an obedient animal. She caught it, the glow dimming slightly, but the hum still alive. Her gaze never left him. "You are not a soldier," she said. It was not a question. Jace shook his head. His throat felt dry. "You are a scavenger." He nodded, hating the word but knowing it was true. She studied him for a moment, her silver eyes unreadable. Then she stood, her movements smooth and graceful despite the damage to her armor. The sand shifted under her bare feet as she stepped toward him. She was shorter than he had expected, but her presence felt larger than the wreck behind her. "You have two choices," she said. "Leave now and be forgotten, or stay and be part of something you will not understand until it is too late." Jace swallowed hard. Every instinct told him to leave, to vanish into the dunes and never return. But something in her voice held him in place. There was no threat in her tone, but there was no kindness either. It was as though she was speaking from a place beyond anger or mercy. The desert wind swept around them, carrying the heat and the smell of scorched metal. She turned away from him and began to walk toward the horizon, the spear in her hand catching the sunlight. Jace watched her for a moment, torn between fear and curiosity. He could still leave. He could still forget she ever existed. But as she walked, the air seemed to shift, and he felt that leaving would not truly be an escape. It would only be delaying something that had already begun. Jace stood in the heat, watching her walk away across the dunes. The wrecked ship behind him seemed to fade into the background as the alien woman's figure drew his attention. She moved with purpose, each step leaving a print in the sand that the wind tried to erase. Her spear glowed faintly now, but he could still feel its presence from a distance. It was as if it had marked him, and no matter where he went, it would know. He told himself again to leave, but his legs did not obey. Something about her made him follow, even though he knew it was dangerous. She did not look back to see if he was coming. She simply kept moving, as though she already knew he would. The silence between them was heavy, broken only by the sound of their boots in the sand. The twin suns beat down on them, making the air shimmer and his throat dry. After a while, She stopped near a cluster of jagged rocks that rose from the sand like teeth. The shade they offered was small but welcome. She leaned her spear against one of the stones and began to work on a small device she pulled from her belt. Jace stayed a few steps away, unsure if he should speak. He studied her armor, noticing the dents, burns, and strange markings etched into the plates. Every mark seemed to have a story, though he doubted she would share them. "You are far from your home," she said suddenly, without looking up. Her tone was calm, but her words made him tense. "And you are walking in a war you do not understand," Jace frowned. "I didn't come for war," he said. "I came for trade." She glanced at him then, and for a moment he thought she might smile. But her eyes stayed cold, and her expression remained still. "In this desert, trade is war," she replied. She crouched by the device, which began to emit a faint pulse of light. Jace leaned slightly to see it better, but her hand moved to the spear in an instant, a silent warning. He stepped back. The pulse grew stronger, spreading into the sand in ripples that vanished after a few meters. "What is that?" he asked. She looked at him as if deciding how much to reveal. "A beacon," she said. "It will bring what I need, or who I need." The way she said it made him unsure if that was good or bad. A sudden shadow passed over them, and Jace looked up. Far above, a small black shape was cutting through the sky. It was moving fast, heading directly toward them. His stomach tightened. "Is that yours?" he asked. She did not answer right away. She picked up her spear, the blade catching the sunlight in a flash. "It is not a friend," she said finally. Her voice carried no fear, only certainty. She stepped out from the rocks, her posture shifting into that of a fighter ready to meet whatever came. Jace stayed in the shade, watching the black shape grow larger. Soon he could see it was not a ship but some kind of flying machine with long curved wings. It moved silently, too silently, and a thin mist trailed behind it. The air tasted metallic, and Jace's instincts told him this was trouble. The alien woman raised her spear, the tip burning brighter. The hum returned, low and steady, and the ground beneath his feet seemed to respond to it. The machine descended, stopping in the air a few dozen meters away. From its underside, 3 figures dropped to the sand. They were tall, armored, and carried weapons shaped like hooks and blades. Their armor was marked with the same glowing script as the woman's spear, but their colors were dark and dull. One of them pointed toward her, speaking in a sharp, rapid language Jace could not understand. She replied in the same tongue, her voice like steel striking stone. Whatever she said made them move. 2 advanced on her left and right while the 3rd came straight toward her. She did not wait. The spear moved faster than Jace's eyes could follow, the blade cutting through the air with a sound like fire tearing cloth. The first attacker's weapon shattered on impact, and the force of her strike sent him crashing into the sand. She turned, blocking the second attacker's hook with the shaft of her spear and pushing him back with a kick that threw him off. Balance, Jace realized he was holding his breath. The 3rd figure charged her from behind, but she spun, the spear's glowing tip passing within a hair's breadth of his face before it cut deep into his armor. The hum of the weapon was louder. Now, almost alive with battle, the attackers stumbled back, regrouping. She stood between them and Jace, her silver eyes locked on her enemies, the desert wind whipping her hair around her face like a banner. Asterisk. The 3 attackers circled her carefully now, their movements slower and more measured. The sand shifted under their boots as they spread out, trying to flank her. The alien woman stood still, her spear held in both hands, the tip glowing brighter with each second. Her breathing was calm, her eyes never leaving them. Jace stayed near the rocks, unsure if he should run or watch. Something told him that leaving now might be even more dangerous. The first attacker moved, lunging in with a wide slash. She twisted aside, the blade passing inches from her armor. Her spear shot forward in a counter, striking the attacker's chest with enough force to send him staggering back. Before he could recover, she spun the shaft and caught his legs, sweeping him to the ground. The second attacker tried to strike while her back was turned, but she ducked low, the glowing spear slicing upward and grazing his helmet. The hum of the weapon seemed to grow sharper, almost like it enjoyed the fight. The third attacker stayed back, watching for an opening. He was larger than the others, his armor heavier, and his weapon was not a hook but a long blade with jagged edges. He pointed it toward her, then toward Jace. The message was clear. If he could not defeat her, he would take the human instead. Jace felt his stomach twist as the man began to move toward him, sand spraying from his boots. The alien woman's head turned slightly, and in that moment, the spear left her hand. It flew like an arrow, spinning once before striking the ground between Jace and the attacker. A ring of light exploded outward from the impact, knocking the man back several steps. Jace shielded his eyes from the sudden flash. When he lowered his arm, the woman was already moving. She closed the distance in seconds, reclaiming the spear and striking with a speed that made the attacker stumble. Her movements were smooth, each attack flowing into the next without pause. The first attacker had recovered and was charging again. She sidestepped him, using his momentum to send him colliding into the second attacker. The two fell in a tangle of limbs and armor. The third tried to retreat, but she stepped forward and planted the spear in the sand. The blade pulsed once, and the ground under him seemed to shift. He lost his balance, and in that instant, she swept the weapon up and sent him crashing to the ground with a sharp strike to the chest. The fight ended as quickly as it began. The three attackers lay in the sand, groaning and unable to rise. She stood over them, the spear's glow fading back to a steady hum. Her breathing was still calm, as if the battle had been nothing more than a small distraction. She turned to Jace, her expression unreadable. "You stay too close to death," she said. "One day it will notice you." Jace tried to answer, but the words caught in his throat. He could only nod. She looked at the fallen attackers once more, then stepped toward the rocks where the beacon still pulsed. "Others will come," she said. "These were only the first." Her voice carried no fear, only certainty. She adjusted the device, the pulse growing brighter. "You still have time to walk away." Jace stared at her, thinking about leaving, but the thought felt hollow. He had already seen too much. Something in him knew that whatever came next would not leave him untouched. She picked up a small metal container from the wreck of the beacon and poured its contents into the sand. The grains turned dark, almost black, and then began to move on their own, forming strange patterns. Jace stepped closer, curiosity outweighing his caution. "What is that?" he asked. "A mark," she replied. "It tells my people where I am. And it tells my enemies too." The patterns shimmered for a moment, then sank into the sand until no trace was left. Far in the distance, a low rumble began to rise. It was not the sound of wind or machines. It was deeper, like something alive moving beneath the desert. Jace felt the ground tremble under his boots. She raised her spear again, the glow returning, and glanced toward the horizon. "They are coming faster than I thought," she said. Her stance shifted, and Jace realized she was ready for another fight. The heat of the suns pressed down on them, but the air suddenly felt colder. She stepped past him, her eyes fixed on the horizon. "Stay behind me," she said. The words were not a request but a command. Jace swallowed and obeyed, his eyes scanning the dunes for whatever was approaching. The rumble grew louder, and a shadow began to stretch across the sand in front of them. Whatever was coming was large, and it was not slowing down. The desert seemed to hold its breath as the shadow grew darker and closer. The shadow stretched across the sand, growing larger with each passing moment. The rumble beneath their feet deepened, rattling the rocks around them. Jace gripped the edge of a stone for balance, his eyes fixed on the horizon. The alien woman stood perfectly still, spear in hand, her gaze locked forward. The heat of the suns made the air ripple, but the shape cutting across the dunes was solid and fast. Something massive burst from behind a dune, sending a wave of sand into the air. At first, Jace thought it was another machine, but then he saw. It was alive. Its body was covered in thick, dark scales, and its head was crowned with long, curved horns. 4 legs powered it forward, each ending in claws that tore into the sand. Its mouth opened, revealing rows of sharp teeth, and a roar echoed across the desert. The ground shook harder with each stride it took. The woman raised her spear, the blade burning with bright light. She stepped forward, placing herself between Jace and the beast. "Stay back," she said without looking at him. Her voice carried a tone that left no room for argument. Jace could only nod, pressing himself against the rocks. The creature's eyes locked onto them, glowing faintly as it lowered its head and charged. Sand exploded behind it as it moved faster than he expected for something so large. She stood her ground until the last moment. As the beast lunged, she shifted to the side, her spear slicing across its flank. A burst of light followed the strike, and the creature bellowed in pain. It swung its tail, smashing it into the rocks where Jace had been standing seconds before. He threw himself aside, feeling the rush of air as the stone shattered under the impact. The dust stung his eyes, and he struggled to see through the haze. The woman pressed her attack, moving quickly around the creature. Her spear struck again and again, each hit leaving glowing lines across its dark scales. The beast snapped at her, but she was too fast. She ducked under its massive jaws, driving the spear into its chest with both hands. The hum of the weapon filled the air, and the creature howled, stumbling back a few steps. Its claws tore trenches in the sand as it tried to regain balance. Jace's heart pounded as he realized the creature was not retreating. Instead, it lowered itself again, ready to charge. The woman shifted her stance, waiting for it to make the first move. The two circled each other, predator against predator. The air seemed to tighten, every sound drowned out by the pounding of Jace's heartbeat. Then, with a sudden burst of speed, the creature lunged forward again, its claws tearing at the ground. This time she did not dodge. She met the charge head-on, driving the spear forward. The blade sank deep into the creature's throat, and the glow flared so bright that Jace had to shield his eyes. The roar turned into a gurgle, and the massive body collapsed to the sand with a heavy thud. The woman stood over it, pulling her weapon free. Steam rose from the wound, and the air smelled of scorched metal and something bitter. She looked down at the beast for a long moment before turning to Jace. "This one was sent," she said. Her words made him frown. "Sent? By who?" She walked past him, her gaze sweeping the horizon. "My enemies have many tools. They will not stop because this one has fallen." Her voice was calm, but there was an edge to it that made Jace uneasy. She moved back to the beacon and adjusted something on its surface. The pulse from the beacon changed, now flashing in a steady rhythm. Jace stepped closer, watching as a faint symbol appeared in the air above it. "What's that?" he asked. She glanced at him before returning her focus to the device. "A warning," she said. "And an invitation. My people will see it. So will those who wish to kill me." Her hand tightened on the spear, the blade glowing again. "The next ones will come soon." Jace felt a chill despite the heat. In the distance, movement caught his eye. At first, it was just a ripple in the air, but then shapes began to form against the shimmer of the heat. Several figures were approaching, walking with the confidence of those who knew they were expected. The woman's silver eyes narrowed as she took her place facing the open desert. The spear hummed again, ready for another fight. Jace stepped beside her, knowing he could no longer pretend he was only here to scavenge. Asterisk. The figures drew closer, their shapes becoming clear against the shifting air. They were tall, lean, and armored in smooth plates that reflected the suns. Each carried a weapon, but unlike the previous attackers, these weapons were long staffs tipped with glowing blades. They moved in perfect formation, their steps silent despite the sand. Jace counted 6 of them, and each step they took felt deliberate, like they had already decided the outcome of this meeting. The woman shifted her stance, her spear angled slightly toward the ground. Her eyes scanned the group, and Jace could see the slight tension in her grip. "They are not hunters," she said quietly. "They are soldiers." The word felt heavy in the air. Jace felt a knot tighten in his chest. He had seen soldiers before, both human and alien, but these moved differently. They were not here to test her strength. They were here to end it. When they stopped a short distance away, one stepped forward. His armor was darker than the others, and his blade glowed brighter. He spoke in the same sharp language Jace had heard earlier. The woman replied in the same tongue, her voice steady and cold. The exchange was brief, but the tone left no doubt. Whatever was said was not a negotiation. The leader raised his staff slightly, and the others spread out to surround them. Jace's hand went to the small knife at his belt. It was useless against weapons like theirs, but holding it made him feel less helpless. The woman glanced at him once, her eyes locking with his for a heartbeat. "Stay behind me," she said. He wanted to argue but didn't. Her gaze returned to the soldiers, who now moved closer, their weapons humming with a sound that made the air seem thicker. The first attack came without warning. One of the soldiers on the left lunged, his blade slicing through the air. The woman's spear came up in a blur, catching the strike and shoving it aside. She countered with a sharp thrust, forcing the soldier back. Another came from the right, aiming low, but she spun the spear, blocking and striking in one motion. The fight began in earnest, sand spraying under the force of each blow. Jace tried to keep up with her movements, but she was too fast. The spear danced in her hands, striking high-low, then spinning to block. The glow from the blade lit her face in flashes, and her silver eyes never wavered. The soldiers pressed her from all sides, their coordination precise. Yet, every time they thought they had an opening, she slipped through it, turning their own momentum against them. One soldier managed to get close enough to sweep her legs. But she caught herself, planting the spear in the sand and flipping back to her feet. The crowd of armored figures tightened around her, leaving Jace near the edge of the fight. He could see one of them looking in his direction, the glow of his weapon shifting toward him. His grip tightened on the knife, knowing it would do little, but prepared to defend himself if he had to. The soldier advanced, but before he could strike, the woman moved between them. Her spear came down in a heavy arc, the blade clashing against the soldier's weapon. Sparks of light burst from the impact, and the hum of both weapons deepened. She pushed him back, then turned to Jace briefly. "Do not move," she said. Her tone was firm, but there was something in her voice that almost sounded like trust. The fight dragged on, neither side giving ground. The soldiers were skilled, and their weapons were deadly, but the woman's speed and precision kept them from breaking through. Jace realized she was not just defending herself. She was keeping them away from him, even as she faced multiple enemies at once. Every strike, every step she took, was calculated to control the battlefield around them. Finally, the leader stepped in, his blade clashing with her spear in a flurry of rapid strikes. The sound was sharp and rhythmic, like metal drums in the heat. He was stronger than the others, and for the first time, Jace saw her forced back a step, but she did not falter. She turned his strength aside, striking his armor with enough force to dent the plates. The other soldiers hesitated, watching their leader meet her in equal battle. The clash between them ended in a sudden burst of light as her spear locked against his blade. For a moment, the desert was silent except for the hum of the weapons. Then the leader stepped back, speaking sharply to the others. Without another strike, they began to retreat, their movements still precise and disciplined. Jace watched them fade into the distance, the tension in the air slowly easing. The woman lowered her spear but kept her eyes on the horizon. The soldiers disappeared into the shimmering heat, their dark armor blending with the distant dunes. The air felt lighter without their presence, but Jace could see the tension still in the woman's posture. She stood with her spear in hand, scanning the horizon as if expecting them to return. The hum of the weapon had softened, but its glow still pulsed faintly, like it was waiting for her command. She turned toward him, her silver eyes calm yet sharp. "They will not stop," she said. "They are testing my strength. The next time, they will come with more." Jace wiped the sweat from his brow, his mind racing. "Why me?" he asked. "Why protect me?" Her gaze did not waver. "Because you were here. And because leaving you would mean they could use you against me." Her tone was matter-of-fact, without any trace of kindness or cruelty. Jace looked down at the sand, unsure how to respond. He had not asked to be a part of her war, yet every moment he stayed tied him to it more tightly. He thought about leaving, disappearing into the dunes, but something in him knew that the desert would not let him go so easily now. She began walking again, and without a word, he followed. The suns burned overhead, casting long shadows across the sand. They traveled for hours, stopping only when they reached a ridge that overlooked a vast stretch of empty desert. From this height, Jace could see far into the distance, but there was nothing, no movement, no signs of life. The woman crouched and placed her palm against the ground. Her eyes closed, and the glow from her spear dimmed completely. For a long moment, she stayed like that, silent and still. Then she opened her eyes and stood. "They are moving toward us from 3 sides," she said. Jace's stomach tightened. "The soldiers?" She nodded once. "And something else, bigger." Her voice was steady, but the weight of her words made his pulse quicken. He glanced around, trying to see what she sensed, but the desert remained empty. She moved to a shaded part of the ridge and began checking the edges of her armor. Jace could see scratches and dents from earlier fights, yet she made no effort to repair them. Instead, she removed a small metal disc from a pouch at her waist. She pressed it into the sand, and it began to sink on its own. "What is that?" he asked. "A trap," she said. "One they will not see until it is too late." Her eyes met his for a moment. "If they reach this place, you will stay here. Do not follow me." Jay shook his head, but her gaze was unyielding. He understood that arguing would change nothing. The wind picked up, carrying with it a faint vibration. Jace frowned, listening. It was not the rumble of a beast like before, nor the thrum of machines. It was sharper, faster, like blades cutting through the air. The woman lifted her spear, her eyes scanning the horizon again. "They are close," she said. "Too close." She moved away from the ridge and into the open sand, planting her feet firmly as if ready to face whatever came. Jay stayed where she had told him, though every part of him wanted to move closer. His hands clenched into fists as the first shapes appeared in the distance. These were not soldiers in armor, but tall, slender figures that seemed almost insect-like. Their limbs were long and jointed, their heads narrow, and their movements disturbingly fast. Each carried a weapon shaped like a curved blade, and their eyes glowed faintly in the sunlight. They closed the distance with frightening speed. Woman waited until they were almost upon her before striking. Her spear became a blur of light and motion, each swing precise and deadly. The creatures moved with unnatural agility, dodging and twisting, but the spear still found its mark. One fell to the sand, its body collapsing in a tangle of limbs. Another tried to leap over her, but she spun and drove the blade upward, cutting it from the air. Jace could only watch, his heart pounding. She fought like the desert itself, relentless, shifting, and impossible to predict. The sand erupted. around her as she moved, each strike sending shockwaves through the ground. The creatures tried to overwhelm her with their speed, but she adapted to their rhythm, turning their attacks against them. Soon the sand was littered with their broken bodies, and the last of them hissed before retreating into the distance. She stood among the fallen, breathing steadily. The hum of the spear faded, and she lowered it, her eyes returning to the ridge. "That was only one wave," she said. Her tone was quiet but certain. Jace swallowed hard, knowing that whatever came next would be worse. The desert was far from empty, and each fight was drawing more enemies toward them. She looked to the horizon again, the sunlight catching in her silver eyes like a reflection of the endless sands. Asterisk. The heat of the suns pressed heavily on the ridge as they prepared for what was coming. The woman stood at the edge, her spear glowing brighter than before. Jace could see the light from it reflecting off the sand, casting long streaks that danced with the wind. She did not speak, but her stillness carried the weight of someone. Who knew the next battle could be the last? Far in the distance, a dark line began to form. At first, it looked like a mirage, but soon it sharpened into shapes, dozens of figures moving together. Some were soldiers in armor, others were the insect-like creatures they had already faced. And behind them, Jace saw something huge, its size dwarfing the rest. The ground trembled as it moved, each step sending small ripples through the sand. The air grew heavy, as though the desert itself knew what was coming. She turned to him, her eyes holding his without a hint of doubt. "Stay here," she said. "When this ends, one of us will walk away." Jace wanted to argue, but his voice caught. There was nothing he could say that would change her decision. She stepped forward, the spear humming with a deep and steady rhythm. The wind picked up, lifting strands of her silver-white hair around her face like threads of light. The first wave reached her quickly. Soldiers charged from the left and right, their weapons raised high. She met them head-on, her spear cutting through armor and bone with equal ease. Sparks of light flashed with each strike, and the air rang with the sound of metal clashing. She moved without hesitation, her body flowing between attack and defense in a seamless rhythm. Every enemy that came close fell within moments. The insect-like creatures followed, darting in with impossible speed. They leapt and twisted, their blades flashing, but she read their movements and struck before they could land a hit. Jace watched. Her spin and strike, each motion precise, each step deliberate. The sand around her became a storm of motion, but she stood at the center of it all, unshaken. Her presence alone seemed to hold back the tide pressing in from all sides. Then the ground shook harder. The massive shape at the rear of the enemy force moved forward. As it drew closer, Jace saw it clearly, a towering beast with skin like black stone and eyes that burned with red light. Its arms were long and heavy, ending in claws that looked like they could crush steel. The soldiers and creatures spread out, giving it space as it advanced toward her. The air was thick with heat and the scent of scorched sand. She faced the beast without stepping back. Her spear's glow shifted from orange to blinding white, the hum now a deep vibration Jace could feel in his chest. The beast roared, charging forward with earth-shaking force. At the last moment, she leapt aside, the spear slicing across its leg. The cut burned with light, and the beast stumbled, but it did not fall. It swung one massive claw at her, missing by inches as she rolled away. The fight between them was like nothing Jace had ever seen. She struck again and again, aiming for the joints, the throat, the eyes. Each blow left marks of light that seared into the beast's skin. But the creature was relentless, its attacks heavy and fast despite its size. The ground cracked under its weight, and the shockwaves from its steps made Jace struggle to stay on his feet. Still, she pressed on, never losing her focus. Finally, she planted the spear deep into the sand and pressed her hand against its shaft. A surge of light shot down into the ground, and the sand erupted beneath the beast's feet. It roared in, pain as glowing spikes of energy shot upward, piercing its legs. She pulled the spear free and charged, driving the blade into its chest with all her strength. The light flared so bright that Jace had to turn away. When the glow faded, the beast was still. It collapsed to the ground with a deep, echoing thud, sending a wave of dust into the air. The remaining enemies froze for a moment, then began to retreat into the distance. She stood in the center of the battlefield, her spear dimming slowly. Her breathing was steady, but her shoulders sagged slightly, the first sign of exhaustion Jace had seen in her. She looked back at him, her silver eyes calm and unbroken. Jace stepped forward, his voice finally returning. "What happens now?" he asked. She glanced at the retreating enemies, then back at him. "Now," she said, "you choose. You can walk away and never see me again. Or you can stay, and everything you know will change." The wind carried her words across the ridge, and Jace knew there was no easy choice. But as he looked at her standing there in the sun, spear in hand, he felt his answer forming. He walked toward her without hesitation.